It is no secret here on Redoubt Productions that we like trains here. Some people like cars, some people like planes, and some people like boats. Hello, Captain Garrett. I like trains. And we've talked about trains in Pennsylvania for a while here on the channel. Many episodes back on Retracing History, we explored the Horseshoe Curve, which was a very important engineering feat to allow rail lines to find a way over the Allegheny Mountains. Now, the Horseshoe Curve was not the only key in getting railroads between Philadelphia and Pittsburgh into the land's west. There was another engineering marvel just a few miles to the west of the Horseshoe Curve that I've kind of overlooked, but today I hope to give it its deserved spotlight. We're here in the community of Gallitzin, Pennsylvania. We're resting on the west side of the Allegheny summit, where there are a series of tunnels that were bored through here in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. Let's take a look.
It's nice when you see that a community takes pride in a piece of history that is sitting in their own backyard. So within this small tunnels park they have right on the western portals of the tunnels, they have a little signage here about all the technical details and why the tunnels exist. And I'm going to read it with my great, fantastic narrator voice. And for those that don't want to listen to that fantastic narrator voice that cuts concrete, you could pause the video and read the sign for yourself. The Gallitzin Tunnels was an engineering triumph and an essential step in conquering the steep grades of the Allegheny Mountains by railroad. Combined with the Horseshoe Curve, the Gallitzin Tunnel made the idea of a Pennsylvania mainline railroad a reality. Construction began on the first Gallitzin Tunnel in 1849 under the direction of engineer Thomas Seabrook and contractor Thomas Rutter. The work was done by 400 Irish immigrants from County Cork. During construction, progress was plagued by such problems as water and an unstable 4-foot vein of coal surrounded by weak shell and clay. Eventually, almost the entire tunnel needed to be arced for safety. Upon its completion on January 21st, 1854, the Gallitzin Tunnel was the final link in completing the mountain division of the Pennsylvania Railroad. With the addition of a second tunnel in 1904, the mainline rail system was expanded to 4 tracks to Pittsburgh. Twice the Pennsylvania Mainline Railway was threatened because of its crucial role in transportation of troops, supplies, and materials for the defense of our nation. During the American Civil War, a Confederate raid plotted unsuccessfully to destroy the tunnel. During World War II, a clandestine German mission had plans to destroy the tunnels, but the operation failed when the German agents were captured off the Atlantic coast. And there we got the interesting specs about these tunnels. They were built in 1854 and 1904 with a length of 3,612 feet, width of 24 feet, and at a cost of $125 per linear foot. Darn, $125 per linear foot. And I think we're referring to mid-19th century currency with those dollars. Well, but here we are. Here are 2 of the 3 western portals of what's known commonly as the Gallitzin Tunnels. And there's some technicalities about the name. So I said you're looking at 2 of the 3 tunnels. The first tunnel, which was built by the Pennsylvania Railroad, was constructed in the early 1850s. And it is this portal right here, albeit it was much more narrow when it was first constructed, really only allowed 1 line to go through. At the same time, the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania still had interests in the old Pennsylvania Mainline Canal, which included a portage railroad, an inclined railroad, which we've talked about before on the channel. That line ran several miles south of here. Well, they did not want to waste the old portage railroad, so they tried to use elements of it, grade it out so the steam locomotives we're familiar with the rods and the gears, could try to pull their way over the Allegheny summit that direction. They had to also bore their own tunnel. So just like a few hundred feet to the south of here, there is the new portage tunnel that was initially meant for the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania's desperate bid to keep using what they had invested in, that Portage Railroad system. Guess who ended up winning the route over the Allegheny Mountains? Of course, we've talked about the significance of the horseshoe curve, allowing for a relatively smooth ride for any train across the Allegheny Mountains between the East Coast and the Midwest. So in the late 1850s, the Pennsylvania Railroad bought out all the holdings over that new Portage Railroad, and they kind of just left that old tunnel to be abandoned. Well, let's fast forward a half century to the early 20th century, and traffic has, I don't know, tripled, quadrupled since then. The Pennsylvania Railroad is one of the leading railroad companies in the United States of America. And well, they need some more tracks to get through the mountains. So what they're going to end up doing is, in addition to reopening that new Portage Railroad, they're going to kind of use it as like a bypass almost, in case the main line's choked up here at the Allegheny Tunnel. They're also going to bore a whole new tunnel, a twin sister essentially to the Allegheny Tunnel. And you may even be able to see the portal for that twin tunnel. That is the technical Gallitzin Tunnel. And I believe at its peak they had like 4 different rail lines making their way through the mountains. Now you have to remember, there weren't 2 lines here yet, but I think they had one here, and 1 or maybe 2 over at the Portage Tunnel. So they were able to have a 4-line main line making its way over the mountains via 3 different tunnels, all centrally located in Gallitzin, Pennsylvania. In 1994, when Conrail still controlled these lines, to make sure that they still had some sort of customers who used rail service over the Allegheny Mountain, they decided they needed to increase the size of the Gallitzin tunnels. What they ended up actually doing was the Allegheny Tunnel, which is on the right, and that was the one built back in 1854. They dug several feet down, lowering the grade of the rail line. They also widened the Allegheny Tunnel, so both tracks only had to go through one tunnel. And once these improvements were finished, the technical Gallitzin Tunnel, which is over here, was boarded up and is no longer in use. However, it's still cool that you can see both of the historic portals. Now, something I've not really seen in most places where rail fans gather is these giant windows being opened in the mesh. So you have unobstructed views if you're trying to photograph trains. So if you're a rail buff, highly recommend coming to the Gallitzin tunnels. Gallitzin, Pennsylvania is relatively friendly to rail fans. Along Jackson Street, just on the opposite sides of the tracks from the Tunnels Park, is a known landmark to rail fans who come to central Pennsylvania. That there is the Tunnel Inn, which has a series of rooms all themed around the railroads. Very popular, especially because of the patio you'll see off to the left, where you can watch trains enter and emerge from the Gallitzin tunnels. And let me tell you, when trains do emerge from these tunnels or coming up the slope to enter the tunnels, you're going to hear horsepower on a scale you've never heard before. Be it steam locomotives in the 19th century, or be it diesel locomotives in the 21st century, the grade to the Gallitzin tunnels, whichever side you take, is very difficult.
So this train is traveling eastbound through the Allegheny Tunnel here in Gallitzin, Pennsylvania. When it emerges on the other side, it'll begin the downward slope going into Altoona, Pennsylvania, which means this train will have to navigate around the horseshoe curve once it emerges from these tunnels.
Just across the street from the western portal of the tunnels, the park also has a volunteer-ran museum. Right now their hours are in flux, so this will be the incentive for a future trip. So what's really interesting is this block here was the original keystone for the Allegheny Tunnel when it opened back in 1854. And essentially the keystone would go right in the middle of an arch, and that essentially has all of the weight pressing on it, allowing for the arch to be one of the strongest engineering designs ever created by man. The 1854 keystone was removed during the renovations of the tunnel back in the 1990s. Just inside the small tunnels park that's here in Gallitzin, there's a sign that's not really relating to the tunnels, and actually has nothing to do with the tunnels, but some local history nevertheless. Heisong versus Gallitzin School District. In 1894, the Pennsylvania Supreme Court ruled that the Catholic Sisters of St. Joseph were permitted to wear religious attire while teaching in Gallitzin public schools. In response, the Pennsylvania legislature passed the 1895 Garb Act, forbidding public school teachers from wearing religious clothing or insignia. In the years since, state and federal courts have sought to balance the right to religious expression with the principles of secular public education. So, interesting struggle over the First Amendment occurred right here in Gallitzin, Pennsylvania. Just adjacent to the tunnels here in Tunnels Park in Gallitzin, we have a classic N5C caboose. This may be one of the most iconic caboose designs in railroad history, at least in North America. The Pennsylvania Railroad used these and other types of cabooses, or caboose. Is caboose the plural for cabooses? Have we ever figured that out yet? I don't think we ever figured it out. Let's try to figure that out. Anyways, this is the classic design of the caboose that you saw in the Pennsylvania Railroad in the latter half of the 19th century, going through the first half of the 20th century. So I've seen these on display at several museums, but every time I see one, it's cool to actually get to see that a piece of the Pennsylvania Railroad is still surviving. It's always important to remember the people who were able to preserve this history for us to learn from. One of those historical preservationists was Joseph L. Ruffley. He was born in 1924, passed away in 2018, was known locally as Mr. Caboose. Joe was a founding member of the Gallitzin Area Tourist Council and served as its historian. He was also one of the hands-on crew who lovingly restored this caboose from a rusted-out hull to make it the centerpiece of Tunnels Park here in Gallitzin. Joe loved to personally greet visitors and share with them his vast knowledge of and personal experience from the Pennsylvania Railroad. So the doors are not locked on the caboose, so I didn't break and enter. The doors just weren't locked, so I presume Tunnels Park allow it to be open on a daily basis. And a lot of these items in here, you'll see, are going to be credited to Mr. Ruffley, Mr. Caboose. So, got a live variety here of photographs. This is interesting. These are images of the Red Arrow wreck that only occur, I want to say, about maybe 3 miles east of here from Gallitzin. In 1947, now the Red Arrow was one of the express trains of the Pennsylvania Railroad, and well, it came around a sharp turn known as Bennington Curve, not to be confused with the famed Horseshoe Curve. There's still some dispute over what triggered the crash, but essentially the train was going way over the speed limit, jumped over the rails, and tumbled over the embankment. I want to say it was between, I think it was around 20 or 30 people were killed in the ensuing wreck. There's a really good image from the east side of Gallitzin tunnels, which the public really can't see, and you absolutely can't get this perspective today due to vegetation. But off to the left, you'll see the new Portage Tunnel. That was the tunnel built by the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania to try to salvage the old Portage Railroad grade, use it in a modern railroad sense. It didn't work out too long for them since they sold to the Pennsylvania Railroad. And it kind of sat abandoned for a while until it was reopened by the Penn C in the early 20th century. And then down over here on the right are the actual Gallitzin tunnels that the Pennsylvania Railroad had built. The left portal is the Allegheny portal, which is still used today, albeit it's 2 tracks wide. And off to the far right is the titular Gallitzin tunnel, established in 1904. Just downhill to the west of where we're standing, where the various rail lines converge back together into one main line, there was a watchtower. This is the AR watchtower, built by the Pennsylvania Railroad back in 1889. And it was one of the last ones that remained in operation until 1995, controlling signals and switches entering and emerging from the Gallitzin tunnels. Panels put together to talk about the restoration of the caboose and the opening of Tunnels Park. And there you can see Mr. Ruffley in the middle, flanked by other avid preservationists who put this park together and got this caboose back to its glory days. Some images showing them getting the caboose prepped into position. There's also images of some trains passing through Gallitzin tunnels, and this is really good. This actually shows you this is actually ongoing during the expansion of Allegheny Tunnel, which is the right portal. You can see they're expanded for 2 rails, but at that time, while they're doing the renovations, Gallitzin and New Portage tunnels were the only avenue over the Allegheny summit. So here we got a westbound train of Conrails emerging from the Gallitzin tunnels, and this is cool. This is an image of the last engine to exit Gallitzin Tunnel, the technical Gallitzin Tunnel, before it was abandoned in 1995. Got some equipment and utensils relating to railroad history here near the Gallitzin tunnels. I would love to know what these wooden rollers are for. Does anybody know in the comment section what these wooden rollers would have been used for by the railroad?
Alright, you can hear this train's picking up steam. It is heading westbound toward Pittsburgh, so it's going to get faster and faster as it goes downhill. Which reminds me, I too need to start picking up speed, getting back on the road. I got a lot of other stuff to see. Thank you guys for tuning in to this installment of Retracing History. Before you leave, be sure to hit the like button down below. Let the YouTube algorithm know that you want to have historical content in your feed. You do want to be educated by social media. Yeah, I know what I said. So, thank you for watching, and also thank you to our followers on Ko-fi. They are part of our Garrison program. With a small monthly fee, you too can join the Garrison here at Revolutionize Productions. Fortify historical preservation. There's a few small bonuses that you'll get when you become part of our Garrison. So thank you to the Garrison. Thank you to all the people watching today. We'll see you next time.